We got a guest. I've been looking forward to talking to this guy ever since excerpts of his book ran in GQ, wasn't it?
I believe it was.
Yeah. Matt Latimer's his name. The book is called Speechless, Tales of a White House Survivor. He was one of the speechwriters for George W. Bush in the last 2 years of his administration. And just looking at the excerpts, it's a really funny book, and some of it's frightening. I mean, he really pulled the curtain aside to see what was going on inside. And let's get Matt on here. Matt, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
We're doing really well. How do you get to be a speechwriter for the president?
Well, sometimes it's just a matter of luck, and sometimes it's a matter of talent, and sometimes it's both.
Well,
and then how did you arrive at it?
Was this a goal or something you stumbled into?
Well, this was a goal that I had since I was a kid in Michigan. I always wanted to be a presidential speechwriter, and I had liberal parents, but I was a conservative, and I came to Washington. I went to law school, and I gave up my law career to get a low-paying job on Capitol Hill and worked my way up the ladder of the Senate and the House and went to the Pentagon and worked for Donald Rumsfeld as his chief speechwriter, and then from there ended up at the White House.
And how old were you then?
Well, I started in my 20s, and now I was in my 30s.
You go in there as a true believer?
To the White House? I sure did.
Yeah.
I believed in, I was a kid who grew up in the Reagan years, and I liked Ronald Reagan. And I was a believer in conservative principles, lower taxes, smaller government, strong national defense. I believed in all that stuff, and I thought people in Washington did that too.
Well, those are good goals, but you probably found out politicians and their staff can be otherwise.
Once you got on the inside and could see it up close, how long was it before you were disillusioned?
Well, I had the good fortune that there were a couple people that I worked for. I was sort of choosing who I worked for, and I worked for some good people on the Hill who are really conservative and really stand up for their principles, like Senator John Kyle, for example, of Arizona. And Secretary Rumsfeld, I respected him a lot too, but it was easy to get disillusioned, and I left there, my time in the White House, very disillusioned by what I saw.
Now, how close do you get to President Bush? There was at least one staffer, I forget his name, who commented about your book. Matt Latimer. I don't even remember the guy. He was around. How could he have heard these conversations that are in his book? Now,
is that just the boilerplate that comes from people who are trying to undermine your credibility?
Oh, yeah. They have two arguments. First, it was, who is this guy? We never ever heard of him. He wasn't in the room. And the second argument was, the president told him his deepest secrets. How dare he betray him? So was I there or not there?
So, all right, how close do you get to George W. Bush as one of his speechwriters?
I got, I got respectably close. But I was probably in his speechwriting meetings at least once a week, sometimes several times a day. I helped write the economic address to the nation to explain that horrible meltdown about a year ago today.
Yeah.
So I was one of his top writers, so I knew him, reasonably well.
So you're in the room there with him going over the speech. You're not in a separate room working on a draft and it's sent to him and then sent back to you.
Well, it depends, but often, we would see him first and he'd give us some guidelines, and we would write the speech, and then he would call us back and go over edits in the Oval Office.
Now, the excerpts that we haven't read the whole book, Matt, I actually have a better view of President Bush than I did before. He sounds relaxed. He sounds funny. He sounds right on in some of his comments about people.
He seemed less frightening than a lot of the people surrounding him. Who really
describing the McCain campaign as a 5-spiral crash is the greatest.
Well, I laughed so hard when he said that. He also called it a cruel hoax.
Well, that's that story where he was invited, he thought, to appear with McCain in front of the media because the questions were, how come President Bush isn't campaigning publicly with John McCain? And then he's told that it's closed to the media.
Right. Tell the rest of that. So
we were told, we were still in the Oval Office, and we were told that McCain was having a hard time getting a crowd together for this event in Phoenix. And President Bush said, you mean he can't get to 500 people to show up for a fundraiser in his hometown? I could get 500 people to show up in Crawford, Texas.
Yeah.
And then he looked out of the window and said to no one in particular, what is this, a cruel hoax?
Yeah, and then you guys apparently used that expression for fun for a while.
Yeah, my friends and I used that endlessly for days. There's no Diet Pepsi? What is this, a cruel hoax?
Yeah, that's cool.
What was interesting is he saw the problems with McCain and Sarah Palin, but apparently a lot of the staffers around him, it's you know what? They sound like they were part of a religious cult. I mean, is there an element of that in administrations?
Well, towards the end of probably every administration, you tend to have the hangers-on who are your big buddies and the loyalists of the loyal. But the problem was there were very momentous events that happened in those last few years, and you needed people who were well qualified. And a lot of those people, in my view, are just sort of buddies as opposed to really well qualified people for their jobs.
So the good people jump after the first term, and then it's just replaced by by the riffraff for the final days.
Well, you were there for the last couple of years, right?
Well, I was one of those riffraff.
No, what I mean what you're saying is that wasn't the A team at the end.
Yeah, no, Doris Kearns Goodwin had that book, The Team of Rivals, about the Lincoln years, and I sort of call the Bush administration, as I say in my book, a team of buddies. And there were people who were trying hard and who were smart, but for the most part, a lot of people just sort of got promoted because they had been around and the president was comfortable with them, and they didn't really serve him that well.
Tell us what these aides saw in Sarah Palin. Bush apparently didn't see the same thing.
No, with his joke about her being the governor of Guam or something.
Yeah. He joked and said, "What is she, the governor of Guam?" But basically, what he said about her was, he was worried that she wasn't well prepared for her family either, for the national spotlight that was about to hit them, and he was right about that.
But he also said that about Obama, I guess, to some extent, right?
Yeah, he said that he wasn't qualified to be president, which is hardly a newsflash that the Republican president thought that. But all these people were running around horrors that I revealed that.
But you described in the book how people were running around just they were crazed over the idea that Sarah Palin was nominated to be the vice presidential candidate. I mean, it looked as if they had taken leave of their senses.
And Bush looked like the sane one.
None of these people knew Sarah Palin. What was it? What was going on in there?
Well, the thing about Governor Palin was, I think she represented for a lot of people the idea that she was a reform-minded person who was not the same old Washington crowd. And the thing is, so many conservatives first of all, couldn't stand John McCain, who I compared putting John McCain as head of the Republican Party in 2008 to naming, Camilla Parker Bowles the head of the Princess Diana Foundation. There's a conflict of interest.
Okay. And there was bad blood between Bush and McCain going back to the run for president previous.
Well, for sure. And he ran against the Republican Party for years. That's why he was a quote-unquote maverick.
But once Palin was out there for a few weeks and it was clear that, she couldn't carry on a coherent interview, it seems everybody dug in their heels instead of analyzing it coldly. I mean, certainly if there was a Democratic candidate who performed the way Palin did, these same people would be ripping that candidate up and down. But somehow everything with Palin, it was always opposite day. Whatever she did was wonderful. And it was just, I'd never seen such a disconnect from reality.
Well, a lot of people have that view, but my view of the whole situation was the person who's responsible for what happened to Governor Palin was John McCain, because here was somebody he interviewed he probably spent more time interviewing his gardener than he did the next vice president of the United States.
Was he just taken with her because she was attractive? What happened there?
Well, he called it, I think they called it a Hail Mary pass, because no conservative could stand John McCain, and he needed to get somebody who would appeal to them. And for Sarah Palin, I would say she motivated thousands of voters who couldn't stand John McCain, and she did what she was asked to do in that regard.
But they needed to also win the middle, which was looking, McCain had some appeal to the middle, which could take away from Obama.
People, the people in the circles I go into who are not as ideological, all they said is, well, what if McCain dies? She's president? And then people couldn't get past that.
Yeah.
Well,
I think,
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think it says a lot about John McCain's judgment that he picks people for positions that apparently he doesn't believe are qualified for, then trash them the minute that it doesn't work for them anymore. I mean, he's the one who put Governor Palin in that position and then surrounded her with aides who didn't like her at all.
All right, well, hang on. We're talking to Matt Latimer. Probably heard of him. We were reading book excerpts a few weeks ago. He was a speechwriter for President Bush. His book is called Speechless: Tales of a White House Survivor.
All right, we want to talk about what was going on when the economy was crashing, because that was a stunning excerpt. All coming up on the John and Ken Show. KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk radio.